Would like to officially call our TACIR meeting for Wednesday, June 9 to order. But before we take the roll, I would like to point out and make a few comments regarding our dear friend and the man who should be chairing this morning. Representative Mike Carter is more than just a chairman to me. He is my friend and my neighbor. We served together in Nashville. And at the request of TACIR, we had prepared a proclamation to honor the life and service of Chairman Carter. But at the request of the family, we are going to have a few words about Chairman Carter, but not do the proclamation this morning, because at the exact same time that we are convening this meeting, 9:30 Eastern Time, we are told that the Hamilton County Commission will be asking Mrs. Joan Carter to serve temporarily in his place. So there will be a new Representative Carter joining the Tennessee General Assembly, which I texted Joan last night and said, it makes me smile because I know this is making Mike smile right now. And I know it's making him very happy. So at the next meeting, after we have the meeting today, we'll set that next date, and that is when the Carter family will join us. They apologize that they weren't able to join us this morning, but the Hamilton County Commission meeting truly takes precedent, and I'm very excited for Joan, and I'm excited for the state of Tennessee that they will have a continuation of amazing representation from Upper Hamilton County. As I said, Mike was more than just a chairman. He was my friend. He was a mentor. He's a legend in Cleveland, Tennessee. He has a farm here in Bradley County, and everyone knows Judge Carter. That's actually how he's referred to here, and it's wonderful to have had that friendship. And everywhere we went, he was greeted. I jokingly said when he bought the farm in Bradley County, Mike, if you come here and run for mayor, I'm in trouble. And he would laugh and say, don't worry, I'm not going to do that. And I miss him, and I would be happy for anyone else who would like to say a few words, either acknowledge or show us, or go ahead and speak, turn your microphone on. But I did want to have just a few moments here of reflection for Chairman Carter here at the beginning of this meeting. The floor is open.
Mr. Chairman, I met, he had me call him Mike, anyway, I met Representative Carter through Representative Lawler, who passed away a couple of years ago. And we met on an issue that we didn't agree on, but he had the ability, and not everybody does, to keep it focused on the issue and not make it personal. And that made for a great friendship. I mean, we agreed, he helped us on a lot of other things, but it's just interesting and made a real impression on me when the first time we met, when Ron took me over to meet him, was on an issue that we didn't agree on. What he was wanting to do passed, but we were able to maintain a friendship, and I really miss him, and so it's a punch in the gut. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, at this time, if without any other comments or reflections from TACIR, if you don't mind, if we could just pause for a brief moment of silence and in honor of Chairman Carter, and we will proceed after that. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you, members of the commission. Like Liquid, I believe we've got a statement of necessity that needs to be read for the record.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I would just like to add, as I'm before I read that statement, just how much the staff appreciated working with Chairman Carter. One of the first things he did, I think, he realizing how it was how difficult it is sometimes to change leadership after Leader Norris had been our chairman for so many years. He had all the staff over for a pizza party over at the Legislative Plaza, or I'm sorry, over at Cordell Hall, and put us at ease pretty quickly. And the staff really enjoyed working with the chairman and with Melinda and his staff. So that said, now for the reading of the statement of necessity, which is pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated Section 410-105A, the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations is to hold meetings quarterly at such other times as it deems necessary. To meet this requirement, the Commission scheduled a meeting for June 9, 2021. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic and related safety protocols in place at the time when the meeting was scheduled, it was determined that a physical quorum of the members could not assemble in person. Therefore, the Commission chose to meet via teleconference. The notice of the meeting was posted on our website along with the agenda and instructions for dialing into the teleconference. Notice was also posted on the state's public meeting calendar website. Mr. Chairman, that is the statement of necessity.
Thank you, Dr. Lippard. Now we'll ask April if she would officially take the roll for our electronic meeting. Miss April?
Good morning, everyone. I'll call the roll, and if you're here, just answer saying here. Mayor Rogers Anderson. Assistant Commissioner Sammy Arnold.
Here.
Mayor Tom Bickers.
Here.
Mayor Buddy Bradshaw.
Here.
Vice Chairman Kevin Brooks.
Here.
Mr. Calvin Clifton.
Here.
Representative John Crawford.
Here.
Deputy Commissioner Paula Davis. Mayor Terry Frank.
Here.
County Clerk Mary Gaither. Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. County Clerk Mary Gaither. Representative Patsy Hazelwood.
Here.
Mayor Jill
Here.
Holland.
Here.
County Executive Jeff Huffman. Representative Harold Love Jr.
Here.
Senator John Lundberg.
Here.
Mayor Keith McDonald.
Present.
Representing the Comptroller's Office, Dana Brim.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Representative Antonio Parkinson. Mr. Jeff Peach.
Here.
Senator Katrina Robinson. Mayor Larry Waters.
Here.
Senator Bo Watson.
Here.
Senator Ken Yeager.
I've got Senator Yeager on text, and he says he is attending the meeting, but I'm not seeing him, so we might have a connection issue. Mark, if you could check on that, please.
Thank you. Senator Jeff Yarbrough.
Here.
And also,
Dr. Lippert,
Representative Parkinson is here also. He's just sent me a text. He's here.
Okay. Dr. Lippert, we do have a quorum.
Thank you, April. So I believe, Mr. Chairman, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes.
Does anyone have any corrections or questions about the minutes that have been distributed? If not, we can have a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
That is a proper motion, properly seconded. April, do you need us to identify who is making these motions for your minutes?
That would be helpful, Mayor.
Representative Parkinson on the motion.
Yarborough second.
That is a proper motion that is properly seconded. Without objections, the motions are approved. The next item on the agenda is the commission and staff update, which is back to you, Director Lippert.
Thank you, Mayor Brooks. I'm going to share the screen for that memo. Just one second. Very good. So as already discussed, the resolution honoring the memory of Chairman Carter, we are going to hold that until our next meeting so that family may attend. The other commission update item for this meeting has to do with the election of officers. According to both our bylaws and our enabling statute, the members are to elect our officers, which is a chair and a vice chair, for 2-year terms. Both Chairman Carter and Vice Chairman Brooks were both elected in May of 2019, so we will be taking nominations for both offices at the meeting today. Vice Chairman Brooks is eligible to stand for re-election. One other note, we'll be doing that election. Our intent is to do that under other business at the end of the agenda today. But just a quick note that according to statute, our chairman must be a member of the General Assembly. And while not set in statute or our bylaws, it has been the practice of the commission to alternate the chairmanship between the House and the Senate when the position becomes vacant. That is it for the commission update, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman. Next item is the staff update. And we have 2 of our staff, Senior Research Associate Rabia Chaudhry and Senior Research Associate Emma Johnson are going to be leaving us this summer. Both of their families are moving out of state. Actually, Rabia actually left us at the end of last month, but I believe she's on the call today. Both Rabia and Emma have been fantastic members of our team and made significant contributions during their time here, and we are going to miss them terribly. We are in the process of interviewing to fill those vacancies, as well as potentially the vacancy left when Senior Research Associate Dave TACIR left earlier this year. But I would like to just take a moment and thank Rabia and Emma for all they've done for the commission and wish them the best of luck going forward. So if you all would just join me in thanking them for their service to the state. Another staff update item is we have Research Associate Kevin Van Zandt. Kevin actually joined the staff a year ago, but he's actually been an employee of the state for 5 years now. So we are marking the milestone of 5 years of service to the state. This is funny in that most of the staff did not meet Kevin in person until just last week when staff started returning more regular on a more regular schedule to the office. So it was nice to actually meet Kevin after having known him for a year. Kevin's been a great staff member and is jumped right in and overcome all the hardships associated with working remotely and didn't miss a beat. So we'd also like to welcome Kevin to the team. And then, thank you. And then finally, we are very fortunate to have 2 interns working with us this summer, and they've already jumped in on projects. We've got Carly Bowers and Kaylee Shepard. Carly's a student in the Master of Public Policy and Administration program at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. She's with plans to graduate next spring, and Kaylee just graduated from that same program last month. So if you could all join me in welcoming Carly and Kaylee to the staff. And I'm sure that we're going to have a great summer working with both of those ladies. And Mr. Chairman, that completes the staff and commission update. And did we lose the mayor? All right, wait.
Hey, Clifford, this goes to the importance of rural broadband.
Exactly. I don't think of Cleveland, Tennessee as being rural, but I know the mayor has noted a number of times the connection issues he has where he's located.
Notice I said that while he was gone, right?
All right. Well, in the interest of time and without objection, while we wait for Mayor Brooks, that item does not need a vote of approval or anything. We can go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is tab 3, our legislative update, which is Emma Johnson. I'm sorry, tab 3 is our accomplishments update, which is Deputy Executive Director Melissa Brown.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Then I feel successful. Okay. That concludes my presentation. No. Good morning, everyone. For the record, I'm Melissa Brown, Deputy Executive Director. As Director Lippard said, I'll be going over tab 3 this morning, which is the accomplishments memo for the past fiscal year. This information will be included in the next biennial report. And again, as Cliff said, there's no formal action required by the commission this morning. This is for information purposes only. And I will say this presentation is going to take a few minutes because there was quite a bit of work done over this past fiscal year. Since July of 2020, you have published 9 official commission reports that are described in the bulleted items at the bottom of page 1 of the memo and carry over to the top of page 2. I'd like to point out that 3 of these, the second bulleted item, which is the most recent biennial report, the 8th bullet, which is at the bottom of the page, the most recent infrastructure needs report, and the report at the top of page 2, the Tennessee Valley Authority's payments in lieu of taxes. All 3 of these reports are required by statute and are recurring reports. Of the other 6 reports, 4 were requested by the General Assembly, 1 was requested by the House Finance Ways and Means Committee, and the other was requested by the House State Committee. And it is these last reports that I would like to describe in a little more detail. So turning to page 2 of the memo, you completed a report related to collaborating to improve community resiliency to natural disasters. This report was prepared in response to Senate Bill 1114 by Senator Yarborough and House Bill 1120 by Representative Freeman from the 111th General Assembly. It was referred by the House State Committee. The commission was asked to specifically address 4 issues, which are listed in the middle of page 2 of your docket book memo. The report noted that local governments and state agencies are already implementing strategies to prepare and recover from disruptions to everyday life, and interagency collaboration is already occurring. The state should ensure that ongoing resilience efforts continue, including collaboration among agencies and local governments. Now, you took no position on the exact structure of these collaborative efforts, but said they should include a focus on community resilience planning features and gave examples of what some of those might be. A copy of the final report was sent to both speakers. Next, you completed a very comprehensive report on local governments and the sources of revenue to fund them. Now, this report was requested by the House Finance Ways and Means Committee during discussion of House Bill 971 by Representative Sargent in the 110th General Assembly, and directed the Commission to address the duties of counties and cities mandated by law and the funds that flow from the state to counties and cities to comply with the law. This is the third and final report of the Commission's comprehensive study. You made no specific recommendations, but instead the report was intended to provide policymakers with the information needed for further discussion and policy consideration. The first interim report was published in February 2019 and addressed online sales tax collection and distribution. The second interim report, published in January of 2020, focused on K-12 education services and funding and included a recommendation that a comprehensive review of the components in the basic education program funding formula be made by the BEP Review Committee or other designated state and local officials and other stakeholders. A copy of this report was sent to both speakers, the chair of the House Finance Ways and Means Committee, and members of the General Assembly. The next report, that starts at the bottom of page 3, related to the effects of sharing resources among school systems in counties with more than one school system. This report was prepared in response to Senate Joint Resolution 593 from the 110th General Assembly, and it was sponsored by Senator Hale. It directed the Commission to study the overall effect on public K-12 education in Tennessee of the laws and regulations related to the sharing of resources among and operation of multiple school systems located in the same county. Now, the resolution also noted that, quote, the creation of new school districts has in the past created conflict regarding the ownership of existing school buildings and facilities. So in response, the report also considers options for the transfer of school property to new city school systems. You recommended that because countywide property taxes and countywide local option sales taxes apply to property and sales within cities and special school districts, the General Assembly could require counties to share this revenue when they use it for education capital expenditures, as is required when they use it for education operations and maintenance. But if the state does so, it should consider adopting other alternatives that would improve state equity in counties with multiple student equity in counties with multiple school systems while adhering to principles of taxpayer equity. And then you offered some possible alternatives, which are listed in page 4.
Hey, Melissa?
Yes, sir.
Your screen's not moving with your...
And I can do that. I'm just going to say I didn't know if I had the skills to talk to you and move the screen at the same time. But I will scroll down, sir.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. Now watch my screen freeze. Okay, here we go. This is about where we are now. Now this may slow me down a bit because you're asking me to do 2 things at one time. But we'll try to make it work. You said that the General Assembly should establish a method for transferring school property, both real and personal, to new school systems formed by existing cities. And finally, you said the General Assembly should require that the purchase price of the property be determined before the city referendum on the creation of a city school system. Now, a copy of this report was sent to both speakers and members of the General Assembly. The fourth report addressed cost savings of right to shop programs. It responded to Public Chapter 407 Acts of 2019 and directed the Commission to study any cost savings realized by enrollees of health insurance plans in other states that have adopted incentive program legislation or incentive programs that encourage enrollees to shop for and use lower price healthcare services. The study was also to include cost savings resulting from programs offered by both private health plans and state employee health plans. Now, no specific recommendations were made, but you did find that shopping for healthcare services can result in some savings for consumers and insurers, and when price tools are combined with incentive programs, they do have the potential to save more, but usage for both the tools and the incentive programs varies widely. The data show the programs produce cost savings, but there's not yet enough data to determine whether the savings are significant over time. Next, you completed a study of small cell wireless facilities and public rights-of-way in Tennessee. It was prepared in response to Public Chapter 819, Acts of 2018, which created a framework governing the regulation of small cell wireless facilities in public rights-of-way and directed the Commission to study the effects of the Act and noted specific issues to be addressed, which are noted at the bottom of page 5. The Commission was also directed to make any recommendations for changes to the Act based on the study's finding. Now, there were 4 findings. One was that initial small cell deployments have been located primarily in urban and suburban areas in need of added wireless capacity. So because broadband is more likely to already exist in these areas, the Act's effect on broadband deployment in unserved areas has been minimal. Second, although several new or enhanced applications in transportation and other sectors likely could be supported by small cells, there's uncertainty about how soon advances in wireless service can fuel new products that consumers are willing to pay for. The Commission staff did not attempt to quantify the Act's fiscal effects because of the small number of local governments that had received more than a dozen small cell applications. While some local officials raised concerns about the maximum fees authorized under the Act, others responded that the cost of complying with the Act has been minimal. And the effect of small cells on community aesthetics is the most widespread concern among local officials interviewed. Local governments are currently authorized to propose design alternatives, which could include co-location on existing poles during the application review process, offering an opportunity for applicants to collaborate on solutions acceptable to both parties. Now, the issue of aesthetics is the one around which you adopted 2 recommendations, and they begin at the top of page 7. The first recommendation is that local governments are encouraged to both update existing ordinances that set aesthetic standards for their communities to ensure their requirements apply to small cells and include small cells in any new standards they adopt. And secondly, the recommendation is the General Assembly could consider authorizing local governments to require co-location of small cells in areas with existing poles. You noted that care would need to be taken to ensure this authority could not be used to block the deployment of small cells in situations where applicants can demonstrate that co-location is not feasible either for technical reasons or because of added cost, similar to limitations on co-location requirements adopted in Georgia. And because co-location will likely involve the use of electric utility poles, any co-location requirements should also ensure the continued authority of local power companies to protect the safety and reliability of the electric grid. A copy of this report was sent to the chair of the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee and the vice chair of the House Commerce Committee. The 6th report is you updated your 2017 report on broadband internet deployment, availability, and adoption. It was updated, it was prepared in response to Public Chapter 228, Acts of 2017. You recommended that, and these are at the beginning, at the bottom of page 7. I'll scroll down. You recommended that the state and local governments should continue to identify opportunities to increase funding for libraries and schools to assist their efforts to facilitate broadband adoption and short-term access in their communities, and gave examples of how this could be done. The state should keep supporting efforts to expand the broadband access in Tennessee by continuing to fund the broadband grant program and could consider increasing its annual appropriations to accelerate broadband expansion to more unserved areas. The Department of Economic and Community Development should develop its own broadband coverage maps for the state and update them annually based on address level data reported to it under agreements with broadband providers. Next, you recommended that state and local governments should consider tying any new incentives for broadband providers directly to coverage expansions while limiting the overall share of project costs that those incentives pay for. And finally, you recommended the state should consider eliminating or easing existing territorial restrictions on electric cooperatives and municipal electric systems. And in doing so, the state should also consider ways it can protect electric ratepayers, and gave examples of how that might be accomplished. A copy of the final report was sent to both speakers and members of the General Assembly. In addition to these reports, staff prepared one report update. Since 1990, fiscal year 94-95, TACIR staff has issued a series of reports on spending equity to measure spending equity improvement, and this is the most recent report in that series. Going on to page 9 of the memo, staff provided 3 presentations over the past year. 2 were by Dr. Owen. One was to the Tennessee State Board of Education related to broadband access and adoption in Tennessee. And the other was to the Appropriations Subcommittee of the Tennessee House of Representatives, and it was entitled Findings and Recommendations of TACIR's Update to its 2017 report on broadband deployment, availability, and adoption in Tennessee. And Dr. Kevin Van Zandt presented to the Vanderbilt Graduate Department of History on TACIR policy analysis and employment opportunities for PhDs outside of academia. Over the past year, we've responded to requests for information from members of the General Assembly and legislative committees. We've provided information and assistance to local government officials, state agencies, lobbyists, the public, and the media. TACIR has administered 10 contracts over the past year. 9 of these are with development districts that relate to the data collection for the public infrastructure needs inventory. And the second contract, or the 10th contract actually, is with the Middle Tennessee State University. It relates to the Economic Indicators website, and this is a partnership with the Business and Economic Research Center at MTSU. The next section of the memo separates the reports by policy area. And I'll just give you a couple of quick highlights on infrastructure. Staff has continued the annual infrastructure needs inventory. They've collected information from 141 school systems, 95 counties, 344 municipalities, and 263 other entities. And these other entities are typically subgroups of the larger groups I just mentioned. Next, you'll see a section on other research. And this is a section for reports that don't fall into our statutorily mandated categories. And I know you're excited. I'm on the last page. Using technology for public information. We continue to publish all of our reports on the TACIR website. Staff has continued to update and enhance the county profiles where we provide demographic, financial, and other information for each county. Publish timely information to the Tracking Tennessee's Economy website in partnership with MTSU. Posted timely information to the Facebook page for TACIR, notifying the public of new reports, elaborating on topics of interest, and posting relevant research by other organizations. And new this year, we have begun a collaboration with the Tennessee Customer Focused Government Group to share and link to TACIR data, resources, and publications on the Transparent Tennessee website. And this is still in process. It's not completed, but we're very excited about this opportunity to share our information more widely. And finally, something new on the accomplishments memo. During the Senate State and Local Government Committee on March 23rd of 2021, the Deputy Commissioner from the Department of General Services announced that the State of Tennessee Excess Property Strategy was developed in consultation with TACIR and relied on a report that TACIR had issued. And the report was the Improving Management of Government-Owned Real Property in Tennessee, which was issued in January of 2019. So even after publication of reports, your work continues to have a positive influence on the work of the state government. And with that, I will conclude my presentation and will respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Director Brown. I think I'm back. How timely that we discussed rural broadband during your presentation.
Yes.
And yes, Representative Parkinson, I could hear you when you said that earlier. We will now open the floor for any questions, comments, or observations of the very large and successful 2020-2021 accomplishments. The floor is open.
Great job, Melissa.
Thank you, Mayor.
I have promised Assistant Commissioner Sammy that I will refrain from my comments about rural broadband until a more appropriate time. Are there any other comments, questions, or observations from the members of the commission? Hearing none and seeing none. Cliff, if you'll do me a favor and keep an eye out if anyone acknowledges or raises their hand.
Certainly, and we also have a staff member who's also assisting me in assisting you on that.
Right.
So we will do that. I would like to, if I could, Mr. Chairman, note that Paula Davis, I'm showing as an attendee, and I haven't been able to move her over yet, but I just wanted to acknowledge that Ms. Davis, Commissioner Davis, is also attending currently.
Great. Thank you for that. And thanks to whomever got my GoToWebinar camera working again on the Nashville side. I'm grateful for that. I don't see that a vote needs to be taken on the accomplishments updates.
Correct.
Which means we can now go to tab 4 unless there's other discussion, which would be legislative update from Senior Research Associate Miss Emma Johnson.
And while Emma gets started here, I don't think I mentioned during the staff update, Chairman, that even though Emma is leaving us at next month, she is going to continue to work with us on a part-time basis in assisting us as we get new staff members trained, and we're very thankful to her for that.
Okay, can you all see my screen on tab 4? Perfect. Well, thank you and good morning, Commission members. My name is Emma Johnson, and I'll be presenting the legislative update for the 2021 session of the General Assembly that adjourned in early May. The legislative update memo covers 2 things. First, it describes the bills that were passed or considered this session dealing with issues that have been studied by this commission over the past few years. And second, it discusses the legislation that requests new TACIR studies. You'll have an opportunity to vote on the work program amendment for each of these requests in the following presentation by our Deputy Executive Director, Melissa Brown. And I'll first start my presentation by going over the bills relating to past commission studies and then discuss the requests for new studies. And I'll try and move along here if I'm able to. So starting first with the issue of internet sales tax, which was the focus of the Commission's February 2019 interim report, the General Assembly passed Public Chapter 285 relating to the Streamlined Sales and Use Tax Agreement. The General Assembly first adopted streamlined provisions in 2007 to become an associate member of the agreement. At that time, the General Assembly also enacted other streamlined provisions that would have made Tennessee a full member, but the implementations of these provisions has been postponed every 2 years since they were first scheduled to take effect. 2 of these provisions would have changed Tennessee from origin-based to destination-based sourcing for interstate sales and would have limited the applicability of the single article cap. Following the 2018 U.S. Supreme Court decision in South Dakota v. Wayfair, it became apparent that full membership in the streamlined agreement was not necessary to tax out-of-state dealers, and so the Commission recommended that the General Assembly not allow these 2 provisions to go into effect. Consistent with the Commission's recommendation, the new law deleted both provisions along with the remaining streamlined provisions that the state never implemented. And moving on to the next topic, the General Assembly also enacted Public Chapter 410, known as the Reentry Success Act of 2021, which creates a program consistent with the Commission recommendation in its August 2017 report on housing Tennessee's convicted felons. The new law implements a number of measures aimed to reduce recidivism, one of which involves the Department of Correction paying an accreditation stipend to eligible counties for convicted felons the county houses. The stipend will be available to eligible counties offering evidence-based programming that reduces recidivism to all felons housed by the county that matches the individual risks and needs of offenders. Similarly, the Commission's report recommended that the state offer funding assistance beyond the daily reimbursement rate for housing state prisoners to help counties implement programs proven to reduce recidivism and improve outcomes for prisoners and communities. Next, the General Assembly considered but did not pass Senate Bill 687 by Gilmore and House Bill 689 by Beck, which would have required every county election commission that purchases a direct recording electronic voting system after July 1st, 2021, to ensure that the system has the capability to create a voter verifiable paper audit trail for each ballot cast. This is consistent with a recommendation in the 2007 and 2018 Commission staff reports addressing voter confidence and election security. The General Assembly also considered numerous bills related to the professional privilege tax, but these bills did not pass. Senate Bill 184 by Bowling and House Bill 987 by Rudder, as well as Senate Bill 884 by Stevens and House Bill 519 by Gantt, aim to eliminate the professional privilege tax, and Senate Bill 1195 by Lundberg and House Bill 1241 by Parkinson would have exempted judges and chancellors who are prohibited from practicing law from the professional privilege tax that's assessed on attorneys. The Commission did not make a specific recommendation to eliminate the professional privilege tax in its December 2016 report on the subject, but it did discuss concerns raised over time by legislators and various professions regarding the equity of the tax. The topic of broadband, which was discussed in two Commission reports from January 2017 and January 2021, which was addressed in several bills considered this session, but that did not pass, and specific bills related to past Commission studies are outlined in the memo. Each of these bills proposed to expand broadband, but the methods for doing so varied. Methods contemplated by the bills include authorizing a municipal electric system, electric cooperative, telephone cooperative, and an eligible municipal energy authority to provide broadband outside of its service area. Other proposed methods include creating a tax credit to offset pole attachment fees with funds being redeposited into the Broadband Accessibility Grant Program, and another bill would have increased the minimum download and upload speed thresholds of broadband service required for grant eligibility under the program. A different bill sought to authorize local governments to provide financial assistance to an industrial development corporation for broadband projects. And although these bills did not pass this session, I just wanted to mention that the General Assembly appropriated $100 million to the Department of Economic and Community Development to increase broadband accessibility. And the General Assembly also considered but did not pass a bill related to the Competitive Wireless Broadband Investment, Deployment, and Safety Act of 2018, which was the subject of a December 2020 Commission report. Senate Bill 857 by Bowling and House Bill 1397 by Rudder would have clarified that the act does not prohibit a local authority from preventing the installation of wireless facilities in a right-of-way that is within an area that has existing internet coverage. The Commission said in its report that some local officials questioned whether local governments retain enough authority under the act to protect and accommodate other right-of-way infrastructure and users in addition to small cells, noting that rights-of-way in some areas were crowded with existing infrastructure. Another topic considered by the General Assembly this session related to previous Commission study pertains to community resiliency to natural disasters. Senate Bill 928 by Yarborough and House Bill 936 by Freeman was moved to the first calendar in 2022 of the Senate Government Operations Committee, but it intended to create multi-service entities with representatives from local and state government, private businesses, community organizations, and other entities to address long-term resiliency planning in transportation, water, and other infrastructure. Similarly, and as Melissa already mentioned, the Commission's September 2020 report on this subject recommended that the state ensure the continuation of ongoing resiliency efforts by Tennessee local governments and state agencies, including collaborative efforts among these entities, and recommended engaging community members in the decision-making process. Next, the General Assembly considered but did not pass a bill related to the transfer of public school properties in counties with more than one school system. As amended in committee, Senate Bill 898 by Stevens would have transferred school property owned by a county school system to a newly created city system in the county if the parties did not enter into an agreement for the county to continue operating within the city system's boundaries. The Commission discussed the issue of school property transfers in multi-system counties in its December 2020 report and recommended that the General Assembly establish a method for transferring both real and personal school property to newly formed city school systems. The Commission, however, did not recommend the same method proposed by the legislation, but instead recommended that a local committee be created to determine what property should be transferred and how to determine what compensation should be provided. And finally, for legislation related to previous TACIR studies, the General Assembly considered but did not pass Senate Bill 182 by Massey and House Bill 173 by Manis, which would have required the Tennessee Emergency Communications Board to develop a statewide implementation plan for text to 911 service. In its 2017 report on Tennessee's 911 system, the Commission included information about the implementation of next generation 911 in the state, which supports the receipt of text and other forms of data. The report noted that guidelines and standards were being developed in the state and national levels to help emergency communications districts to train and handle text messages, train employees to help handle text messages. And I'll now turn to the request made by the General Assembly this session for additional TACIR studies. The General Assembly requested 4 new TACIR studies this session, 3 of which are directed by Public Chapter and 1 from a request by the Speakers of the House and the Senate. Public Chapter 585 directs TACIR to study the feasibility of creating a state gold depository, including whether other states and jurisdictions have done so, and requires TACIR to report its findings and recommendations by January 1st, 2022. Public Chapter 497 directs TACIR to study the issues related to non-fish and game recreational activities, particularly the use of non-motorized vessels. The specific questions raised by the new law are described in the memo, but include issues related to the use of resources managed by the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency and the funding for maintaining, sustaining, and improving access to these activities. The law requires TACIR to submit a report on its findings and recommendations no later than December 31st, 2022. The third study directed by Public Chapter is Public Chapter 503, which directs TACIR to perform a comprehensive evaluation on the socioeconomic impact of childhood obesity in Tennessee and its short and long-term effects. The new law sets a due date of January 31st, 2023 for TACIR to report its findings and recommendations. The fourth study request comes from a letter by Speaker Sexton and Lieutenant Governor McNally, which asks TACIR to study the issues presented in Senate Bill 1604 by Bailey and House Bill 366 by Williams. Among other provisions, the bill would have authorized a governmental entity to require a right-of-way reservation as a condition of approving any subdivision of property, but would require compensation be given to the property owner for land taken pursuant to the right-of-way reservation, and a due date for a report on this study was not specified. And another bill was passed by the House of Representatives, but has not yet passed the Senate, would require an additional TACIR study. House Bill 1593 by Miller would direct TACIR to conduct a study on disparities in the issuance or award of state contracts to businesses owned and operated by African Americans, and would require TACIR to include in the study recommendations for reducing these disparities. The bill established a January 31st, 2022 deadline for the Commission to submit a report on its findings and recommendations. And that concludes my presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, Melissa will be next presenting the work program amendments for these new studies that were requested by the General Assembly, along with a few additional requests. But I'm first happy to answer any questions before I turn things over to her.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. That was an excellent legislative update, incredibly thorough, and we are grateful that you will be staying with us, at least on a part-time interim status, because we appreciate your hard work. Any members of the commission that have comments, questions, or observations? I see Mayor Bickers has got his hand up. Mayor Bickers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to take a moment and acknowledge the benefit to our legislative members of their work on internet sales tax. as we dealt with the closure of bricks and mortar all across the state during the pandemic, one of the things that made it less impactful was the fact that the internet sales tax revenue kicked in as we were seeing bricks and mortar sales tax revenue decrease. And I'm not sure there's much that anything legislature did more that helped us make it through that difficult time than their work on the internet sales tax and allowing us to capture that income that was going uncaptured. So at least on behalf of our municipality, I want everybody to understand we appreciate your wisdom and your willingness to move forward on that, because it really did make a big difference.
Hear, hear.
Well said, Mayor, and that looks like that was seconded by another mayor. So I commend those comments as well. Any other questions or comments or observations from Ms. Johnson? Seeing none and hearing none, Ms. Johnson, again, thank you for that legislative update and bringing us up to speed on the varied and interesting work of the legislature this past session. It now takes us to tab 5, which is work program amendments and new research plans. Deputy Director Melissa Brown.
Well, because of our technology issues, I once again feel compelled to ask, can you hear me and can you see my screen? Okay, great. Thank you. Once again, for the record, I'm Melissa Brown, Deputy Executive Director, and I will be reviewing the information on tab 5 in the docket book. This is the work program amendment and the new research plans. Emma's done a great job of describing the bills that are up for consideration. I do want to take a quick moment to talk to you about the information that is part of tab 5. Of course, the memo is first. And so one of the first things we will do is cover the existing projects on the work program. But included with the tab, and I have to be careful how I describe this year since this is a remote meeting, on the website there are links to draft research plans for each of the potential projects. And so I've called up one for the proposed study of a state gold depository in Tennessee. For those of you who haven't seen this format, I wanted to give you a quick overview. And so at the top of the research plan is just simply the name of the project, followed by the staff tentatively assigned to work on the project. Next is the purpose of the report or the study. And then next is background. And to be able to put together a research plan, staff has already had to do some very quick research to get an idea of what the issues are. They will have already watched any videos related to the bill going through the legislative process this past session. They will look at any previous bills that were introduced and track those. They'll listen to any testimony from experts that may have been offered to the General Assembly. They'll note questions that arose. They'll talk to the bill sponsors, talk to other stakeholders, literature review, and they'll also take a look at what's happening in other states and what may or may not be happening in other states and what the issues might be. So following, scrolled a little too fast, following the background, step 1, we have an 8-step research process. So the first thing is to define the problem. Based on all the research that's been done thus far, what do we think the problem is? This is followed by assemble some evidence, and this is a list of items of steps the staff will take to research this issue. This list is not exhaustive. This is a starting point, and as the staff learns more about the project and the issues, this will certainly be expanded. And as many of you know, one of our key steps, because we do work on intergovernmental issues, is we often reach out to our commission members for your experience around these topics. Following the research plan is a tentative timeline for completion of the project. And as Emma mentioned in her presentation, some of these come with a deadline and some are open-ended. And then following that, it's not in my copy. I don't have the copy up that is on the website. Following that is either the legislation that requested the study or a copy of a letter that requested the study. So that will follow the research plan. So back to the first page of the docket book memo, we'll quickly review the current work program projects. First is the annual public infrastructure needs inventory report. You approved this at your January 2021 meeting. Staff is simultaneously gathering and checking survey data for next year's report. And additionally, work continues on a special infrastructure staff research project focused on the effects of any social disruptions and economic downturns from the pandemic on public infrastructure needs. And our plan is to have a draft for your review and comment at your summer meeting. Next is the TVA payment in lieu of taxes annual report. Again, this was one that you approved at your January meeting. We will present the next one. Next report is due to you January of 2022 to meet the legislative deadline of February 28th. And finally, the Fiscal Capacity Index. We have submitted this year's index to the Department of Education and the State Board of Education, and Michael Mount, Senior Research Associate, will be providing you an update on this year's calculations at this meeting. The next index is due to the department by May 1st of 2022. Because of the shortened final session of the 111th General Assembly, the Commission was not referred to any additional mandated studies. Now, the Commission instead focused on completing the large volume of studies that it already had, completing recurring mandated studies, and providing additional analysis as needed and requested. And again, we've covered the accomplishments for the past fiscal year under the tab 3 presentation. So today we have
Melissa,
7
could you
amendments.
go ahead and, I'm sorry, could you go ahead and scroll down to that section of the memo?
I'm sorry. I
That's
forgot
fine.
about
Thank you.
Mayor McDonald. I apologize. You asked me to do that, and I forgot it. I was so proud of myself for toggling between two documents. I forgot to scroll down in this one. Okay. So here we have 7 amendments for your consideration. And Mr. Chairman, we can go through these one at a time. We'll handle this however you and the Commission prefer. But the first 3 amendments would add studies that are requested in bills passed by both chambers of the General Assembly. The 4th amendment adds a study requested by speakers of the Senate and the House. The 5th amendment adds a study requested by a bill passed in the House. And the final 2 amendments add studies requested by Commission members. Now, I do want to point out related to voting on amendments this year that according to the change in our bylaws that you made at the November 2020 meeting, the first 5 amendments will require a majority vote of the Commission members present and voting, as long as we have a quorum. The final 2 require an affirmative vote of 17 Commission members who are present and voting.
Thank you, Deputy Director Brown. Director Lippard, could I confirm that we still have the quorum? I know my audio and video went in and out, but could we just quickly confirm that we still have, for the last 2 amendments, at least the 17?
I'm still showing that we have at least 17 members present, Mayor Brooks.
So with that addition, it would be possible for a vote to be taken should the Commission choose to on all of these items. Are there any other additional comments or questions from members of the Commission?
I'm just, for clarification, Chairman, are you suggesting that we do a motion that would include all 7?
Following comments or other questions, if it is acceptable, rather than going item by item, I think it would help expedite things. If we do have the 17 required for the final 2, we would automatically be able to vote for the first 5.
Right.
There could be possibly discussion on one of the 7, which we are happy to have at this time. In addition to that, there could be possibilities. I had one other item of discussion that I wanted to bring up. Director Lippard, I will refer back to you as far as parliamentary procedure at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I agree that if we have the votes for the 17, then we automatically have a quorum for the others. So we could take that approach. Alternately, if we want to take the member requested studies separately or as a separate group, we could do 2 votes, one for the legislatively referred studies with a simple quorum, and then take the member requested studies. Staff is prepared to proceed either way.
Mayor McDonald, you had your hand up. You're recognized.
Yeah, I would just ask the fellow commissioners to consider a positive vote on Amendment 7 in particular. I think that is important, the way some of this gets handled on the rear end and how long it takes trying to fix that. So I just want to put a plug in for Amendment 7. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. And that Amendment 7 is
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mayor Holland, and I also would certainly go along with, I think that was Mayor McDonald. I certainly would go along with that. And I don't know if it's possible, but I would say that we have had the same problems with the TDOT post-award grant implementations.
And Mayor Brooks, sir, I also saw hands from Mayor Bickers and Senator Yeager and Representative Parkinson.
All right, so we will take those in order. Mayor Bickers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo everything Mayor McDonald said, but I would, as we look at this, I think we need to consider whether or not this is a systemic issue coming out of our agencies and grant programs, as opposed to looking at this one agency. And as I look at the proposed work that is being proposed, it looks like we are going to look at other agencies, but my suspicion is that this isn't unique to this agency or these grants, that it's a systemic problem in that, you know, you have to take the bitter with the sweet, and you get a grant, that a potential grant that may be beneficial to your community, but then you have to look at, you know, what is the impact and if administrative costs going to be in trying to complete this. And keep in mind that the vast majority of our municipalities are of lower population in Oak Ridge and have fewer administrative resources. And there are many instances, I'm positive from my discussions with other fellow mayors, where there will be a grant made available through the legislature or through whatever means. But then when you look at what you have to do to accomplish that grant and to meet the reporting requirements, you make the decision that it's simply too costly or too difficult for us to do that. And so there are communities where these monies are needed and will be of good benefit that aren't going there. So I would encourage us, let's not focus on this, but let's look at whether or not this is a systemic issue in our grant programs. And if it is, can we make some recommendations as to how to make the system work more efficiently and less burdensome on our local governments that are trying to put these monies to good use.
Mayor Bickers, I confirm and commend your comments. As we heard from Mayor Holland, she added TDOT. I, without further elaboration, would like to add ECD and the rural broadband grants. Obviously, we've had problems even this morning here in Cleveland with our broadband and where those grant dollars are going. So I concur with your comments. That takes us to Senator Yeager. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was happy to bring this request at the request of the city of Oak Ridge, which had implementation issues with a Department of Conservation and Environment and Conservation grant that they had received. And I sat down with these folks and learned how burdensome the post-award and implementation process can be. And Oak Ridge is a moderate-sized city with a capable staff, but it stretched them to the limit, wore them out, resulted in some delay, and hence this request. But the comments that I'm hearing from other mayors, excuse me, are well taken. I think it's My request dealt with TDEC, but this is a systemic problem, if you want to characterize it as a problem, an issue rather. And maybe we ought to look at the other departments as well that have been mentioned or others, but I certainly concur that it is a systemic problem and we ought to take a look at all of them.
Thank you, Senator Yeager. I believe, and Representative Parkinson was the next on the list.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with all of the mayors in regards to that this is not just a TDOT issue, but it may be go across or stretch across rather all the departments of the state, and it even is the same issue in a lot of cases when we're granting out funds to nonprofit organizations also. And so I hope that we can, expand it just a little bit to make sure that we look into all of that and make things just a little bit more streamlined and less cumbersome, so to speak, to be able to access these funds and resources. Lastly, too, to the chair, if we can, I would be in favor of, voting all of the legislative requests in one pot, and then hearing the if there are any additional requests for TACIR studies to be able to hear them on their own, if that's okay.
And Chair Lady Hazelwood has also made a similar request regarding the vote and the questions.
Great. So that would be a request by Representative Parkinson, which is seconded by Chair Lady Hazelwood, that is asking for the 5 legislative items to be voted on separately from the 2. Director Lippert, I'm going to ask if it is an appropriate time for me as a member of TACIR to talk about an additional member-sponsored study for litter in the state of Tennessee. Is this the appropriate time that we could add it to be a member study, which would actually now total 8 instead of 7?
Yes, Chairman Brooks, that would be appropriate. You could either bring that up now, or we could do that after the vote on the legislatively referred studies. It's your discretion.
Is there any objection?
Chairman Brooks,
Yes,
Brooks, would I be able to make one more comment? This is Mayor Holland.
Certainly.
I just wanted to say it's not only the post-award implementation that is burdensome, but it's changing things in midstream. After you think you have done everything you're supposed to, and then we're told on numerous occasions to come back and know now we have to do this, or this is something that they've just come up with, and that has happened numerous times, I know, in our community. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mayor Holland. Those are excellent comments and well taken, and also represent challenges that we're having here in the city of Cleveland. So those comments are well timed. Without objection from the commission.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I'm sorry. Mr. Clifton was also asking to be recognized.
Mr. Clifton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I am 100% behind this. However, I think it's important that we know going in that a lot of the requirements are federal requirements, especially with the TDOT projects. We deal with those day in and day out. And just an example, the requirements for a repaving project are almost as cumbersome as a new interstate construction project. So I think we have to go into this with the realization that a lot of these requirements are federally mandated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clifton. Those are appropriate comments. We are running into that here in our municipality. I know everyone across the state has the same, both local, state, and federal obstacles that get in the way of even sidewalks next to one of our parks here in Cleveland, Tennessee. Who knew we had to have an environmental study for a sidewalk? But we did. So what I was going to ask, if the commission would indulge just for a comment or two about litter, if you have the great pleasure of seeing the Cleveland Daily Banner, we have had 3 front page stories on what we at first began with a discovery of illegally dumped tires at exit 20 at the gateway of our new industrial park. Became 1,000 tires, became 5,000 tires. We called every agency we could to ask for help. Unfortunately, that help was not forthcoming. With the help of drones and our friends at TEMA out of Knoxville, the number of tires illegally dumped in Cleveland, Tennessee now totals 20,000 tires. Now that pales in comparison to my colleague, Senator Lundberg, with his tire warehouse. We've studied tires, but I think we need to ask the commission to have our staff study litter all across the state of Tennessee, because something is not working. The Keep America Beautiful funds, the tire funds, all of these dollars that are being distributed. When Kevin Brooks had to buy my daughter's new set of tires, there was a tire reclamation fee ×4 on the bottom of my bill. And when I called to try to get help to get these tires removed, no one seems to know where that money is or where it went to. That's just one of the problems. Our city manager has increasingly gotten comments and questions and concerns about the amount of litter. COVID surprisingly has increased the number of roadside litter problems all across our city and our state. So I am asking that if my colleagues on TACIR would allow us to add one final member-sponsored study. There has been a lot of discussion about it over the last 24 hours about what the scope of this is, whether it has to do with bags or bottles or whatever. Right now, my intent is we need to study and do a very deep dive on what is the problem and why are we not solving the problem. It seems to be something in a state of the size and quality of Tennessee that we should be able to do very easily. Tennessee is ranking at the bottom again. 47th was the last report that I heard in the way we handle trash, litter, and the recovery of these items in our state. I'm happy to answer any questions that my fellow commissioners might have, but I would like to see if we could add that. Senator Lundberg, I see your hand first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And can you be a little more specific? And I guess when you talk about trash, litter, tires, it's pretty broad. Am I getting that you really want to focus on the funding mechanisms, whether it's federal, state, and so on, and specifically related to tires? That gives it a very narrow and a very laser focus.
Well, I can say that my studies in the last couple of weeks here in Cleveland, Tennessee, it began with tires. And so that is the foundation on which I'm building this on. But when I personally toured the tire dump site, there was a boat, there were bathtubs, there were ceiling tiles, there were shingles, and there was sheetrock. All of those fall outside the boundaries of tires, but it all falls within the boundary of litter. So I'm hoping that we can, with the help of TACIR and the great staff, we've already heard these great reports this morning, that they can help us get a handle on why litter and the enforcement of litter ordinances are not working. I reached out to my local environmental officers who blamed the state. So I called the state PHP Environmental, who blamed TEMA. So I called TEMA, and so far I still have 20,000 tires and sheetrock and shingles and bathtubs. No one seems to know where the money is going. The Keep America Beautiful funds, the tire reclamation funds. So Senator, I hope that that answers your question. It is broad, but it is not bottles. It is not deposits. Senator Lundberg.
Oh,
thank you,
excuse
Mr.
me.
Chairman. If I may, I'd like to direct this question to Cliff. Cliff, is what you have heard enough focus for you to launch? Is that a clear enough direction for you?
I believe so, Senator. This looks like, just based on the scope of the problem and the number of players involved, that this could be and the words deep dive, a fairly large study. Our first step, I think, would be to figure out how big of a problem it is and how much information there is out there. So the way I would like to approach it, if it is added to our work program is to focus on those first two steps of our research process initially, and maybe come back to the commission in December or January with an update on what information we've managed to gather, and at that point we can provide a research plan on how to go forward if the commission so chooses.
Senator Lundberg, you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, and my last one to you, Mayor, and to Cliff as well, because there's a couple things. Obviously, litter has been a big focus for the legislature, not just the last year, but for several years. There's a couple things that have been resoundingly defeated by the legislature that probably I don't think needs to come into this. And one is the so-called bottle bill, and another is mandating plastic or alternatives to plastic bags of groceries. And I say that because if you're okay with that, I would like to take some things off the table specifically for Cliff.
Senator Lundberg, those are appropriate comments. I see two other hands. I see Buddy Bradshaw. Senator Yeager was actually in front of him. If you don't mind, if we could hear from them, and then I'll do a quick closing follow-up and address those issues directly. Senator Yeager, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I think that after I sought acknowledgement, your final comments that you made, that you were looking on the issue of why the litter ordinances were not working, and you were not interested in bottles, followed by Senator Lundberg's comments on the so-called bottle bill. My questions have been answered because I think there were some folks who were maybe a little overzealous, no member of this board, mind you, but who were suggesting, who had called me on behalf of the, I believe it was House Bill 174 called the Clean Act, which was going to set up a bureaucracy to tax bottles and et cetera. But I believe, for the record, that your comments tell me that your motion does not include any provision of the House Bill 174.
Thank you, Senator Yeager. The one thing that was in House Bill 174 that was of great interest to me is simply 68-205-108. It's the only part that says that TACIR shall research, evaluate, and develop recommendations. And that's what I'm after.
Okay.
What the scope of litter in Tennessee, the impact that this is having on development, on recruitment. When a company comes to Cleveland, Tennessee to look at our new industrial park, they have to weave their way through this dump site. That is no way for anyone to be introduced to the great state of Tennessee or Cleveland.
Absolutely.
I'm thankful that the Canadian firm that just invested $100 million took us at our word that we were going to clean this up.
Yes.
So now you can understand the urgency that I have to try to find some solutions. Buddy Bradshaw, I believe that you were requesting.
One follow-up, Mr. Chairman. Follow-up comment, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And well, I concur with what you're telling us, Mayor, Mr. Chairman, and have no problem with the study of the litter ordinances in this state. We do spend a lot of money on that, and I think it's always good to review those ordinances and see how our money's being spent.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, Cliff, you may remember, we're just about 3 years out of the tire dump study. I know here in Loudoun County, we had a significant dump, Henry County as well. Starting with that, that'd be a good spot because, we were given permission and used a reward to catch our tire dumper, and so money goes a long way towards friendship. These people that are working together may not be that kind of friends, and money separate them pretty quick. If this study is approved to move forward, I would like to see some form of language included that would make it easier to offer rewards for this. That's the best way we caught this guy. And I'll tell you, from a Loudoun County standpoint, since we've caught that rascal, we've not had any sense. So I think, I think that would go with any dump site. Money goes a long way. Money talks to people. If they've got partners in crime, then that may be a good opportunity to put some kind of, make it simpler, not make it easy, but make it simpler to offer these rewards up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradshaw. Mr. Peach, I saw your hand next.
And Representative Parkinson as well, Mayor Brooks.
You know, we're talking about enforcement, but I was wondering if as part of that study we could kind of look to see how the convenience and cost of trash disposal for citizens in each area, how that may affect the illegal dumping. So I think that's important.
Thank you, Mr. Peach. Representative Parkinson, you're recognized. I think you're muted.
Okay, there we go. I have more parliamentary inquiry. When we vote on these member requests, are we voting on them separately or as a group?
Good question. I think we're going to go back to your recommendation, Representative Parkinson, seconded by Chair Lady Hazelwood, to take the 5 legislative items, take that vote, and then we're going to vote on the 3 member-sponsored studies if I don't have any objection to doing it that way.
And just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So the 3 member-sponsored items, are we going to vote on those individually, or are we going to vote on those as a group?
It would be my recommendation that we vote 5 and 3. If there is a request to separate out at any time, I'm happy to entertain that. If there is a will of the body.
Right, and that would be my request, that we separate each item individually out, if that's okay, and at the will of the body, of course.
Certainly. Do we have any other requests to have things voted on in a line item basis?
This is Senator Watson.
Senator Watson, you're recognized.
Thank you. I haven't heard any discussion about the cost of any of these studies. So we have 7 studies that have been formally introduced. We now are adding an 8th. And so I need to hear from the director about the cost, and each new aspect that members add to the study adds an additional cost to the study. So I want to be sure that the director can absorb these studies and the additional one into the, I think it's $3.4 million budget that we give for TACIR, as well as potential staff limitations, as he has a couple of folks that are leaving, and I'll yield to the director.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, then. Yes, Senator Watson, we believe we can complete these studies within existing resources, partly because there is some flexibility in that not all of the requested studies have a due date, so we're able to stack them in the way we address them, so that we're not overwhelmed. In addition, we with our by the time we get around to a couple of the studies, we'll have brought on new staff members to replace those who are departing. We also, as you're aware of, as Chairman of Senate Finance, we also have a reserve fund that we maintain partly to dip into if we were needed to contract for assistance on any studies. None of these studies, we believe, would require that, however.
Thank you, Senator Watson, and thank you, Director Lippard. Just a parliamentary
I'm sorry, Chairman. Mary Gaither was also asking to be recognized.
Yes, Madam Clerk, you're recognized.
I believe you're muted.
In the interim of Ms. Gaither's audio, I see a hand from Mayor McDonald.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. With regard to the comment that Representative Parkinson made, I'm hoping that Mayor Bickers will move to amend the item that Oak Ridge presented to obviously include that portion, but to expand it to at least some of the other agencies. And in order to do that, I would think it would have to be discussed separately. That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor McDonald, for those comments. Dr. Lippert, I'm going to ask that that was a member-sponsored study, which means we could vote on the 5 as a package that are legislative studies, and then we could vote on the 3 with an amendment on number 7, as I understand it. Just for parliamentary questions and because it's electronic, Dr. Lippert, do we have to have a roll call vote on the outcome of this?
We do, per the state law on remote meetings. Yes, Mayor Brooks.
All right, so I will, yes,
Mayor,
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
just, I have a couple of questions. Is it appropriate as on these amendments to make comments on some of the research plans? Is that appropriate?
Yes, ma'am. It is absolutely appropriate. You're
Okay,
right.
well, first of all, I do support your litter request. As a mayor, it's the #1 call that comes into my office. And so I think TACIR could do a good job in looking for some other solutions, and then possibly even looking at what are the obstacles to enforcement of our litter laws, because I know that's one area where we're weak in our county anyway. I just wanted one comment on the childhood obesity. I wondered if I could kind of make a comment for something for staff to keep in mind or maybe take a look at. Food banks and the quality and types of food that are made available to those in distressed areas or those in need. And I've personally seen this myself, for instance, with some of the second harvest distributions at our senior centers. You know, I look at the food that they are getting and it's literally the worst food you could, you know, it's cakes and high sugars and all of those things. And I'm wondering if we could also take a look at the access. We have a lot of distribution programs in our county, a lot of very generous people. And I wonder, you know, what that impact is on the obesity. So that's just a comment I would like to make. And then on the TWRA, on the some of the comments on the research there, I guess I just wanted to ask, you know, when we're looking at this and the fees that are collected, I just had a question. What are the fees exactly going for? So we're talking about how we're managing. Do the fees actually go to managing or the fees go to policing? And so when we're talking about looking at this from, you know, the increased usage on our waterways, I guess I'm asking a little more clarification on what you're specifically looking at in that regard, if that makes sense, or if I need to clarify a little bit more.
Mayor Frank, thank you for those comments on both amendments 2 and 3. Director Lippert, it's my impression that staff is not only taking notes right now, but can go back and review this after the fact. And so I'm getting some yeses from both Director Lippert and Deputy Director Brown that Mayor Frank, your comments will be taken into consideration on these amendments. I am scanning the faces that I can see, and Cliff, if you can help me, are there any other persons members of the commission wishing to make comments? The plan right now would be to entertain a motion for the first 5 legislative requested studies. We would need a motion and a second to vote on those as amended and notated.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we have a proper motion, and I have a second from Senator Lundberg, was the first one I saw. So
okay.
Go ahead.
I said I'll take the second.
Okay, looks like motion by Parkinson and second by Lundberg, and that would require Miss April to please take the roll.
Thank you, Mayor Brooks. I'll call the roll and you can answer yes or no. Mayor Rogers Anderson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Assistant Commissioner Sammy Arnold, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Tom Bickers?
Yes.
Mayor Buddy Bradshaw?
Yes.
Mayor Kevin Brooks?
Brooks votes yes.
Mr. Calvin Clifton?
Yes.
Representative John Crawford?
Yes.
Deputy Commissioner Paula Davis?
She's nodding her head yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Mayor Terry Frank?
Yes.
County Clerk Gaither? Yes. Okay.
Also yes,
Take it
yes.
easy. Representative Patsy Hazelwood?
Yes.
Mayor Jill Holland?
Yes.
Senator John Lundberg?
Aye.
Representative Harold Love? Don't see him. Mayor Keith McDonald?
Yes.
Representative Parkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Peach?
Yes.
Senator Katrina Robinson?
Yes.
Mayor Larry Waters? Senator Bo Watson?
Watson votes aye.
Senator Ken Yeager?
Aye.
Senator Jeff Yarbrough?
Yarborough, aye.
Did I miss anyone? We have a unanimous vote.
And April, if you could also give us the vote count for that, that's going to be pertinent in later votes.
I have 20 yes. 20
All
votes
right.
yes.
Thank you, Miss April. So that is 20 affirmative votes, which meets the required number for legislative studies. There was a recommendation for Mayor Bickers to amend number 7, which was the Senator Yeager related TDEC Oak Ridge request, to expand that. Mayor Bickers, did you want to make that motion?
Yeah, I would move that we expand the scope of that study to include a more systemic review of the grant implementation and enforcement process in Tennessee, utilizing the TDEC experience with Oak Ridge. We can look at, I would think, our study, we can look at that, we can determine, is there an issue, what it is, and then the study should also then look, is that a similar issue that we are having with other agencies and grant programs? It wouldn't be a full-blown, let's look at everything, but I would suggest we amend our study. Let's look at the Oak Ridge experience and that program, determine what the issues are, and then we need to look and see whether or not it exists in other granting agencies in the state of Tennessee. The report indicates reviewing other state laws, but I think it'd be helpful if we simply specify that this isn't, we're not looking at the isolated situation brought to us by the city of Oak Ridge, but using it as a point to do a deeper evaluation to see how expansive, if this is an issue, and how broad and expansive it will be within our system.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So that is a amendment requested by Mayor Bickers, seconded by Senator Yeager. Without objection, we will amend.
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized, Mayor.
The problems that I've faced over the last 19 years have been from the bureaucracy, not the not the law itself, but how it's interpreted and the rules that are added. Oftentimes, and I can think of a couple of things with TDAC where they exceeded the federal requirement just because they thought that needed to be added and it was not in the legislation. So that's just a comment for the commission and staff as they look at this, to look at the rules and regulations that are added after the law is passed as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. And without objection, we will accept that amendment properly
This
motioned.
is sorry, Chairman. This is Patsy Hazelwood. Could I add a request or a comment to that?
Certainly,
There, in the discussion earlier, the point was made that many of these requirements are federal and not state. So could I ask that we somehow clarify that? So particularly when we're doing these grants with local governments, so that everybody understands what the state is requiring versus what the federal government is requiring, and whose ox is actually being gored here.
That are very acceptable comments for addition, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Thank you. I see Mayor Bickers is requesting to be acknowledged.
Yeah, I would think that would be part of what we're voting on. The reality is, I believe we will discover that the issues we're talking about are a product of administrative rulemaking. It's not what the legislature is passing the statute saying this is what we want to do. And the issues come about as the agencies adopt administrative rules and regulations trying to carry out the legislative intent. I believe we're going to discover that's where the issue is. And if that's the case, it's a state issue and not a federal issue. I do think it would be important to know if the issue is in Nashville or is it in Washington. I would support Chairwoman Hazelwood's request.
Well stated, Mayor Bickers. Thank you. And I don't see any other requests for acknowledgement. I'm looking at Director Lippard to see if there's any other folks that are asking. We have successfully voted in the affirmative for the first 5. As amended with the discussions being added, I would ask for a motion for the 3 member sponsored studies. If there's a motion and a second.
I would so move, Mr. Chairman.
All right, that's a motion by Mayor Bickers. Is there a second?
Anderson, second.
All right, I have a second by Mayor Rogers Anderson. That is proper motion, properly seconded. Are there any other comments, questions?
Just that as this goes forward, it would be as amended. Is that right?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
And again, Chairman Brooks, I would just hope that in this litter study, one of the things that would be included is all of the sources of revenue that are currently out there being directed or supposedly being directed to this issue, where they're going, so that we have a comprehensive list of what dollars are already available, and we know if they're being used or used well.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Hazelwood. Duly noted. And Representative Parkinson, you had one final comment. Representative Parkinson, I'm sorry that we are not able to hear you at this time.
Okay, what about now?
I got you now.
There we go. Sorry about that. I thought I unmuted and I muted. Yeah, I was just trying to be clear. Are we voting on the member introduced studies as a group or individually? What are we doing?
The motion as it is on the floor right now would be for 3 as a group of the members studied.
Okay, okay. Thanks.
All right, so we have a proper motion. It has been properly seconded. We've had discussion and clarification on amendments. Unless there's any other request to be recognized. I will ask Ms. April to please call the roll. This will require the 17 number to pass. Ms. April?
Thank you, Mayor Brooks. Mayor Rogers Anderson, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Votes yes. Assistant Commissioner Sammy Arnold, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Arnold votes yes. Mayor Tom Bickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Bickers votes yes. Mayor Bradshaw, how do you vote?
Bradshaw is aye.
Mayor Bradshaw votes yes. Mayor Brooks, how do you vote?
Brooks votes yes.
Mayor Brooks votes yes. Mr. Clifton, how do you vote?
Clifton votes yes.
Mr. Clifton votes yes. Representative Crawford, how do you vote?
Crawford votes aye.
Representative Crawford votes yes. Deputy Commissioner Davis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Davis votes yes. Mayor Frank, how do you vote?
Frank votes aye.
Mayor Frank votes yes. Clerk Gaither, how do you vote?
Gaither, yes.
Clerk Gaither votes yes. Representative Hazelwood, how do you vote?
Hazelwood votes aye.
Hazelwood votes yes. Mayor Holland, how do you vote?
Holland votes yes.
Mayor Holland votes yes. County Executive Huffman, how do you vote? Representative Love, how do you vote? Representative Love is not present. Senator Lumberg, how do you vote?
Aye.
Senator Lumberg votes yes. Mayor McDonald, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor McDonald votes yes. Dana Brim for the comptroller, how do you vote?
April, after conferring with our bylaws, Ms. Brim contributes to the quorum but is not a voting member.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lippert.
Fairly.
Representative Parkinson, how do you vote? I'm sorry, Representative Parkinson, didn't get that. I'll come back to Representative Parkinson. Mr. Peach, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Peach votes yes. Senator Robinson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Senator Robinson votes yes. Mayor Waters, how do you vote? Mayor Waters is not present. Senator Watson, how do you vote?
Watson votes aye.
Senator Watson votes yes. Senator Yeager, how do you vote?
Yeager votes aye.
Senator Yeager votes yes. Senator Yarborough, how do you vote?
Yarborough votes aye.
Representative Parkinson, how do you vote? I saw him and then he disappeared. Gave me a thumbs up, so he votes yes. I have 20 affirmative votes, yes, Dr. Lippert.
Thank you, Ms. April. Thank you, Director Lippert. So that is 20 votes in the affirmative, which exceeds the number required for member-sponsored studies. I am grateful for the members of the commission for their patience. We have had a long agenda thus far. I do have one programming note. We were scheduled to discuss elections of officers following tab 7, but I have had a request if we could move that up in the agenda, and I'm happy to accommodate that request. It will allow me to now go back to Dr. Lippert to review the procedure for the election of officers. Director Lippert?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Brooks. So the process is pretty straightforward. We just need a nomination and a second for each of the officers. We have 2 officers, a chairman and vice chairman. And once we receive a nomination and a second, if there are no other nominations, then we just need a majority vote for the election of the officers. The only restriction on the officers is that the chairman position has to be filled by a member of the Tennessee General Assembly.
Thank you, Director Lippard, for that clarification and that review of those procedures. Without objection of taking this out of order, I will now open the floor for nominations for the chairmanship of TACIR. The floor is open.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mayor McDonald. I would nominate Senator Yeager for chairman.
Thank you, Mayor McDonald. That's a proper motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion.
I have a proper second from Senator Jeff Yarbrough. That is a proper motion that is properly seconded for the nomination of Senator Ken Yeager to serve as chairman of TACIR. Are there any other?
Mr. Chairman, it's Senator
Yes.
Watson. I move on nomination cease.
That is also a proper motion. That is seconded by Senator Lundberg. That will cease nomination from the floor, which now takes us directly to the vote.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Chairman, this is Senator Watson. I move that Senator Yeager be elected by acclamation.
That is a proper motion, properly seconded, that Senator Ken Yeager will now be, by acclamation, voted in the affirmative as chairman of TACIR. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm honored. Thank you.
And as chairman, I now have the ability to hand you the gavel electronically.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for your outstanding service. Again, during Representative Carter's absence. And thank you so very much for that. And I'm going to now defer to Mr. Lippard to tell us the rules of the selection of vice chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, the rules for selection for vice chairman are the same as the rules for election for a chairman, except there is no restriction on who may serve as vice chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lippard. Then I will open the floor for nominations for vice chairman, and it will require a second. Is there any nominations for vice chairman?
Mr. Peach is asking to be recognized.
Mr. Peach, you're recognized. Thank you, because I can't see everybody. Thank you.
I would move that Mayor Brooks as the vice chairman.
I'll second that.
Mayor Brooks has been duly nominated, and second. Other nominations? Chair would entertain a motion that we close the nomination from Senator Lundberg. Does that require a second, Mr. Lippard?
I believe so, Mr. Chairman.
I don't have a.
Yes. Representative Parkinson and Representative Crawford were both.
All right. Chair would further entertain the motion. The nominations are closed. The chair would entertain a motion that we select Mayor Brooks by acclamation.
Senator Watson, so moved.
And Representative Parkinson seconded.
Any questions? There being none, do we need voice vote? Is that satisfactory, Mr. Lippard?
I believe without objection, it's satisfactory, Mr. Chairman.
If there's no objection, those in favor of the unanimous in the election by acclamation, say aye.
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 Congratulations, Mayor Brooks, Vice Chairman Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful, and I'm happy for you to continue presiding, or if you would like, I'm also happy to continue guiding us through tabs 6 and 7.
If there's no objection from the membership, since Mayor Brooks had expected and candidly prepared to take us through tab 6 to get us to the elections before we had to alter to accommodate some of the members who were leaving early. If there's no objection, then I'll turn the gavel over to Vice Chairman Brooks to lead us through the meeting. There being no objection, Mayor, and if you will, to conclusion, turn it back to me.
Representative Parkinson is asking to be recognized, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Parkinson, you're recognized, and I apologize. I cannot see you on my screen. You're recognized, sir.
I'm sorry, Representative Parkinson, we're not hearing you again.
Mr. Chairman, could we, Ms. Lippard, could we go ahead and proceed with tab 6, and then at the conclusion, maybe then go back to Mr. Parkinson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And I'm trying to see if there's something I can fix on my end, but he seems to be self-muted here, so I think it's something on his end. But I'll keep looking.
Well,
yes, Mr. Chairman, that'd be appropriate.
I'll turn it back over to Mayor Brooks to take us through, Vice Chairman Brooks rather, to take us through this. And we'll start on tab 6. And I'll let Vice Chairman.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Tab 6 in our agenda is the fiscal capacity update, and that is Dr. Michael Mount. Dr. Mount, are you ready? I see that it's on our screen.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Did we still had the 2 other member request studies, or did we group those? Now I'm confused.
It's from the motion and second that was on the floor. We grouped the 3 members together with the
I
affirmative
apologize.
20. No, that's perfectly fine. For those following along at home, I'm grateful. Which would allow us to now proceed after the election of our chairman to tab number 6, fiscal capacity from Dr. Michael Mount.
All right, thank you, commissioners. Can everybody hear me? All right. Am I muted?
You're good, Michael. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. I'm Michael Mount, and I'll be giving the annual update for fiscal capacity, which can be found on tab 6. If you want to follow along, the presentation is after the tables. And before I begin discussing fiscal capacity, I'll give a summary of the basic education program. The BEP is the state's education funding formula. It's used to determine the amount required to fully fund the BEP based on the cost of providing more than 40 components necessary to operate schools. The BEP has 4 components, each with a local and state share. These shares are for the state overall. And for instance, the overall local share for the non-classroom cost is 50%. But the percentage for a school system will be different and depending on its fiscal capacity, except that in the case of non-classroom cost, the local share is capped at 75%. Fiscal capacity allocates the local share among the counties, and the state makes up the difference between that and the total cost of the BEP for each school system. To calculate fiscal capacity, we take the results of TACIR's model and Sieber's model and then average them together. Fiscal capacity is a measure of counties' ability to pay for education from their own sources. It's a county level model, meaning that for counties with more than one school system, they are treated as if they have the same fiscal capacity. The TACIR model is calculated using multiple regression analysis, which is used to determine the weights of the 5 components of the model, which we'll discuss in the next 2 slides. These weights are then multiplied by each county's actual values for those 5 components. Here are the factors. You can see sales tax and property tax base, the tax bases. Continuing on, the other factors include the percentage of property tax base that's residential or farm, which is used as a proxy for a county's ability to export its tax burden. Then there's per capita income, and finally the service burden. Here is the relationship between the factors and fiscal capacity. If the tax bases or per capita income increase, fiscal capacity increases. If the residential and farm percentage or the service burden increase, fiscal capacity decreases. Counties' fiscal capacities indexes add up to 100%. And so one county's fiscal capacity percentage depends on whether its factors grow faster or slower than the 95 county averages. Here we have a map showing the long-term trends in fiscal capacity. Green is up, yellow means you stayed the same, and blue is trending down. These trends reflect how counties are moving relative to each other. In other words, you can have a growing fiscal capacity, but if it grows slower than the state average, then your county will be in a downtrend. As an example, here's a chart showing growth in Hamilton County's and Tennessee's overall sales and property tax bases. And it shows how you have to keep up with the state to keep the same fiscal capacity percentage. And if you'll recall in the previous slide, Hamilton was yellow, meaning it stayed near to the same in the map. One county's fiscal capacity affects every other county's fiscal capacity because it is zero sum. As one county's fiscal capacity decreases, the others will increase by the same amount. Although we can't be sure how the pandemic will affect fiscal capacity, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, fiscal capacity is relative, and what matters is how the factors change for a county relative to the other 94 counties. Second, the TACIR model uses 3-year averages. Averaging over 3 years will spread out the effect of the pandemic on the fiscal capacity calculation. And finally, some of the data used even in this year's model predates the pandemic. One factor that is included is the most recent sales tax base, and it actually increased by 1%. Some data that predates the pandemic are the property tax base and per capita income, and the latest data for those are from 2019. This is my presentation. Are there any questions?
Michael, this is Mayor McDonald. I'm sorry if I missed it, but do you take into consideration the cost of living in fiscal capacity?
That's a good question. No, I think it's the nominal per capita income is in there. The sales tax base would be a reflection of the value of those sales. So I guess there's an argument that it's in there indirectly, but no, there's no accounting for cost of living directly, at least.
Yeah, I would just throw that out as an important issue, and suggest that we look at the possibility of determining that as well. Thank you.
Well stated, Mayor McDonald. Any other comments? Did I see Mayor Frank? Mayor Frank, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, that was a great presentation, and then also the user guide. I have a question with regard to TIFs and tax increment financing. And you went into great detail in the user guide about your formulas. And then also, I think you had a slide that you just threw up there on fiscal capacity regression. And it talks about the amount of the actual amount of money local governments raise to fund their schools, and then also your total assessed property value. Are we, I mean, I know in the whole scheme of things in the history of the state, we're still relatively new with TIFs, but even here locally, if you look at what's in our bank account for the schools or cash on hand and property tax collections, are you looking at what ends up turning around and I know it's a local decision, but what we're turning around and taking from the schools to pay for these developments? And in some cases, and these are discussions that we're having here locally, you know, we're looking at 20 years on some of these agreements. Some predominantly, you put a TIF in place, it predominantly benefits a city system, for instance, but the county gets very little off of the sales tax. And in some cases, the TIF that has been put in place doesn't yield any sales tax. It might bring some jobs, but again, it serves to freeze the property tax for our school system. So I'm just wondering if that's anything you all are looking at. Is it anything the state's tracking? You know, how are we taking that into account as these grow? And I'll go back and like in 2019, 500,000 was what we turned around and wrote back for development. And then this upcoming year, we're adding 3 new TIFs there. That, you know, that's going to be an impact on property tax for the school system. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, first off, I'd refer to our report. We had a report published a few years back regarding the payment in lieu of tax agreements and TIFs.
Okay.
And so I don't have that right on the top of my mind, but that may provide a lot of information about what you're asking.
Well,
the short answer.
I'm just wondering, like from a school, when we're looking at, is there anything in your data, or is there a way that we, when we're assessing the local ability, are we looking at what each county has done on these TIFs? Because that really isn't a fair reflection of local ability if locally we're turning around and giving it to development cost.
The short answer is that our model is based on the property and sales tax basis. So
right.
Whether it's reflected in the model is just a question of, is it in the basis or not? So like I said, the short answer is that no, the TIFs are not taken into account. In fact, a similar issue we've had regarding payment in lieu of tax agreements. Our property tax base factor relies on outdated tax equivalent payment data.
Okay.
And we had considered or thought about using the updated payment in lieu of tax property assessment data, but had not done that yet. And that was also addressed in the report that I referred to a minute ago.
Okay, I'll read that report, and then I guess, do you think it's a small, I can't say negligible, do you think it is something that would have an impact if we looked at that? I mean, I know, for instance, Nashville tried to address that with some of the schools and retaining a percentage. Is it something that you think is a big issue or just a small issue, or what are your personal thoughts?
I don't want to speculate about the size of the effect. We'd want to look into it. I can say that kind of the philosophical thought behind fiscal capacity is that local decisions wouldn't affect it because, you know, in an indirect way, it would affect your own funding for schools.
Mhm.
And so the thought is you shouldn't allow any local decisions to either push it up or down.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Michael, for that last comment. That was the one thing I was going to add. The other thing I would like to comment on, just to elaborate a little bit on what Michael was saying on the TEPs versus the pilots. That is absolutely something we have reviewed, and it's actually a recommendation we've made. We, the commission, made. It was in one of our reports to update the data to reflect the more current information that was developed as part of the process to when the CBER model was also added to fiscal capacity. That's something we don't have. We don't have the autonomous authority to do. That would have to go through an approval process, and it's something that we've brought up to the BEPRC, who also doesn't have the authority to do that themselves. It'd have to go through the commissioners of finance and education. We are going to be we're going to be discussing that subject further later this year with the BEPRC, and I'll keep the commission abridged of any changes that come out of that.
Thank you, Director Lippard. Great comments and contextualization, Mayor Frank. And I think Michael Mount's articulate and well-phrased answers shows just the great level of training that Dr. Lippard and the TACIR staff have and are given. And good job, Mr. Mount, on that presentation. If there are no other, I'm scanning the crowd to see if there's any other acknowledgements for comments. If not, prior to tab 7, I did want to take a moment of personal privilege. I realized I forgot to thank the commission for allowing me to serve as vice chairman. And if my mother is watching, she would be very disappointed that I did not thank my colleagues for the opportunity to serve you and continue serving you and serve at the pleasure of the chairman, now Senator Yeager. So without further ado, that would take us to tab 7, Mr. Bob Moreo and the electric vehicles and other issues affecting road and highway funding. Director Lippard, if there's no other comments, I think we can go straight to tab 7.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On tab 7, I would like to just to set some context. When the commission originally asked us to look at this, the staff started looking at the issue that was as framed by the commission on the potential effect on shift to electric vehicles, the ongoing shift to electric vehicles, the effect on revenue and potentially on TVA payments in lieu of taxes as well. And as the staff dug into it, they realized that this is potentially, as these things often are, even a bigger issue and has other factors going into that. And so Bob is going to, as he goes over the update, he's going to go into some of those other issues as well. And then as we proceed with the study, we'll at some point come back to the commission for further guidance on how specifically tailored they want the study to be, because we may be able to go into some other issues as well. I don't think we're at that stage yet, but I just wanted to bring that up now. Also, I did have a message from County Clerk Gaither, who's continuing to have some problems with her microphone, and she wanted to add some information related to tab 7. Which is that per the Department of Revenue, Tennessee currently has 10,493 electric vehicles registered and 85,764 hybrid vehicles registered. She just wanted to share that. And Mr. Chairman,
could I ask for that 84,000 number again? That's incredibly interesting information.
Yes, that was 85,764.
Anecdotally, the Tesla, Volt, Leaf.
Well, those would actually fall under the 10,000 electric vehicles.
Yeah,
the Tesla, at least. Yeah.
Population increase here in the city of Cleveland, Tennessee, is dramatic, and so I'm looking forward to this report. Thank you, Director Lippard.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, thank you, Cliff and Mr. Chair, Vice Chair. Looks like we have the memo up on the screen. Everyone can hear me all right? Great. Good morning, members. My name is Bob Morio, Senior Research Associate. The memo noted as tab 7 on the agenda, and the research plan presented earlier by Deputy Director Brown and added to the work program were prepared in response to concerns raised during our January meeting that the increased adoption of electric vehicles to replace gas and diesel fueled ones would reduce state shared fuel tax revenue that the state and local governments rely upon to build and maintain roads. It was asked whether payments in lieu of taxes, pilots made by Tennessee Valley Authority might increase as a result of the additional electricity used to charge electric vehicles, which could be a potential band-aid to slow the bleeding. And then with the concerns about revenue on one hand, on the other hand, members had discussed growing demands from residents for governments to do more to make electric vehicle charging more widely available and encourage adoption of electric vehicles. And so we begin with regards to revenue, that it is true that replacing gas and diesel fueled vehicles with electric vehicles over time will reduce shared revenue, and that it's more so for local governments than for the state. But we find that that effect is particularly small compared to some other factors. And so it's actually timely that Clerk Gaither giving that 10,000 electric vehicles number. If we use an estimate of 100,000 vehicles on Tennessee's roads in 2030, which has been, one of the stated targets, so 10 times as many. If those 100,000 electric vehicles are replacing gas-powered vehicles that have an average fuel economy of 35 miles per gallon, a report done for the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation estimated that yearly state fuel tax revenue in 2030 would be reduced by $8.8 million. And as the state's 26 cents per gallon fuel tax is currently apportioned, about 25% of that revenue is distributed to county aid funds and 13% goes to municipal street funds, which would result in a possible $2.2 million decrease in state fuel tax revenue to distribute among counties and $1.1 million that's not available for cities. Instead of fuel taxes, EV owners pay an additional $100 annual registration fee that research shows would be generating $10.4 million annually in 2030, which more than compensates for the overall loss in state fuel taxes due to those vehicles. However, revenue from these registration fees currently it goes entirely into the state highway fund and is not shared with local governments. So right now I'm going to go to, we call it attachment A at the end of the memo, which shows a few different vehicle-related revenue streams. Registration fees and title fees that only go to the state. At the local level, local counties can implement wheel taxes, and then any local option sales taxes on the purchase of vehicle related things can be kept at the local level. But the fuel taxes, state sales taxes, federal highway money, these are things that are all pulled together, available and distributed at the state and local level. And then we have one called attachment B that sort of shows the universes of which fees are paid by drivers or owners of which types of vehicles. Gas and diesel powered traditional cars, which include hybrids that use a combination of fuel and electricity. Those fuel taxes are only paid by them. Electric vehicle owners have the additional EV registration fee that they pay by themselves. But really, regardless of the type of vehicle you own, you pay a basic registration fee, your title fees, wheels to all these other things. It really doesn't matter which type of vehicle you drive. So those are just a couple of things we wanted to show that some things overlap, between both types of vehicles. It's not that, for example, it's not that electric vehicles aren't paying, or owners of electric vehicles aren't already paying registration fees and title fees and the same things that owners of traditional fuel vehicles are. So then, more so than the fuel tax that's lost to electric vehicles, studies find that inflation is the most significant source of revenue loss. In 2030, the buying power of Tennessee's current 26 cents per gallon fuel tax could be reduced by approximately 15 to 25%, which is the equivalent of cutting it back down to 20 cents again today. And that inflation affects both state and local governments alike. And research shows that this has been exacerbated in recent years as costs to design, build, maintain transportation infrastructure have actually risen twice as fast as inflation overall. So you have inflation and you have the fact that transportation related inflation is going up, and these road projects and bridges and things are getting even more expensive. Also, traditional internal combustion engine vehicles have become more fuel efficient, meaning that less fuel tax is collected per vehicle mile driven. Right now, a vehicle in Tennessee getting 24 miles per gallon, driving 12,000 miles per year, would pay $135 in fuel taxes, state fuel tax. At 30 miles per gallon, now that's $108. And if you get to 40 miles per gallon, it's $81. So that even if there were no new electric vehicles at all, fuel tax revenue, without adjusting for inflation, as we said previously, would decrease by about 15% in 2030, just as fuel economy improves. So in light of these challenges, how do Tennessee and other states pay for their roads? As electric vehicles grow in popularity, they're not going to outnumber gas and diesel fueled vehicles for decades. Those numbers earlier mentioned about 10,000 currently, and we're trying to get to 100,000 or 200,000. I think there's close to 3 million, vehicles registered. It's a big number. So it's growing rapidly, but not. It's going to be a while before they start to overtake traditional vehicles. As those vehicles, last 10, 12 years on the road, if you buy a new, fuel traditional vehicle today, you're going to have that for 10 or 12 years, and that's sort of ongoing. And so but as these electric vehicles are growing in popularity, we're going to look at how states support the development of the charging network to meet those residents' needs. So we say that Tennessee is already one of 30 states that charge this special additional fee on electric vehicles, the $100 additional registration fee, which, if you do the math, approximates the fuel tax revenue from driving 12,000 miles in a 30 mile per gallon vehicle over the course of a year. That comes out to about $100. But that all goes into the state highway fund, not back to local governments. In other states, these EV fees range from $50 to $225 currently. How they're earmarked varies. There are several that distribute some of the revenue to local governments, and some that use a portion of that revenue to earmark to expand vehicle charging infrastructure. Tennessee is one of 25 states that charges a flat rate for vehicle registration. The base rate, until you get into large commercial vehicles, is the same for a Tesla or a Toyota Camry or whatever it may be. The remaining states vary fees, sometimes by vehicle weight, sometimes by value. That was interesting when you look at the electric vehicle fees. Owners of Teslas are arguing that in states where the registration is based on value, they're paying a higher registration fee already on their $90,000 Tesla than they were on the $30,000 Toyota they replaced. So why should they have to pay an additional fee just because it's electric now? So you can vary registration by weight, value, the age of vehicles, some other metric. We see that Tennessee's gas tax is fixed per gallon amount, that it's not automatically going to be adjusted for inflation. It'll stay at 26 cents until some sort of legislative action. There are 22 states that have implemented variable rate taxes that will either automatically adjust to inflation or some other metric, fuel economy, things of that nature. And there are many states that use revenue from non-transportation related sources like sales taxes to help pay for their roads and transportation needs. So it seems that when you look at the initial question about TVA and electricity, that TVA pilot money would be unlikely to be of much help. Even as electric vehicle ownership increases significantly, the electricity used for vehicle charging will remain a very small percentage of total electricity consumption, which will then have a small effect on the TVA pilots. I did the math that if there were currently 200,000 battery-powered electric vehicles in the TVA region overall, it's not just Tennessee, but the electricity needed to charge them would represent 0.6% of TVA's total annual power sales. We use a lot of electricity for industry, for residential, for commercial buildings. It's going to take a long time for electricity for vehicle charging to be a big drop in that bucket. But with that said, the additional electricity to charge those electric vehicles could add about $2.8 million to TVA's total pilot, assuming all other electricity use remains the same. Any improvements in, efficiency or anything like that could outweigh. There are a lot of factors that go into how much electricity is going to be used, but assuming all things remain the same, Tennessee could see $1.9 million of that potential increase, where approximately $650,000 of that would go to counties and $280,000 would go to cities. But unlike state fuel tax revenue, TVA pilot revenue is not earmarked for transportation needs, and local governments, I'm sure you all know, use your pilot revenue for funding many different things. And lastly, the state, in conjunction with TVA and other stakeholders, has made electric vehicle manufacturing a key part of its economic development strategy. This is something that we're trying to get ahead of. Several initiatives are underway to encourage the development of more charging locations, and the study will describe these developments and examples of efforts being made in other states. So that concludes my presentation of this memo. I believe when the commission voted earlier on the research plan, the proposed due date in there is December of 2022. So you probably won't hear from me again on this topic until our spring meeting next year, at which time I would present additional research, draft recommendations, and we'll be underway in the process. But happy to have any discussion, take any questions you all may have at this time.
Mr. Murillo, thank you for that presentation. Very good work. I look forward to seeing future studies, especially on those charging station initiatives. Mayor Bickers, your hand was the first one I saw.
Yeah, I would encourage us, as we look at this, to take a hard look at the estimate of 100,000 electric vehicles in 2030. That's a small fraction of the total vehicles registered in the state. And, there's a suggestion that we reach tipping points in history with technology and innovation, from landlines to cell phones, right, from brick and mortar to online, internet. And there's a suggestion that we're at the tipping point with motor vehicles, in that even our pickup trucks now, right? We can go get full size. We're going to be able to go get a full size pickup truck that's all electric that they claim will even power our house if the power goes out. So I think we ought to take a hard look at that estimate of 100,000 EVs, because if we are at a tipping point, I believe that is probably low. We'll look back in 2030 and say we missed the boat, just like we probably missed the boat on cell phone usage and other things. And the other thing that I don't know was stressed, the revenue that is lost is revenue that goes directly to municipalities. For example, we get a direct payment related to the gas tax. Of course, we're restricted. That's money we have to use on highways and streets, but that doesn't come from the state general fund. So if you simply replace the gas tax with a registration fee that goes straight to the state in the state road fund, abs anything else, that's going to create a deficit at the local government level that we're going to have to figure out how to make up, because the vehicles are still going to wear out our roads. We're still going to have potholes. We're still going to have issues we got to fix. We're going to have roads we have to maintain and fix. And as under the current structure, as the fuel tax revenue decreases, our money is coming from the state of Tennessee will decrease. So I would suggest, as we look at that we focus on at least those two issues going forward to make sure we can give the legislature the best picture and counsel we can as how they can deal with this changing technology.
Well stated, Mayor Vickers. Any other comments or acknowledgements from the commission? Cliff, I'll let you let me know if I'm missing anyone.
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Murillo, for the report, for Mayor Vickers for the follow-up, and for Clerk Gaither for the very interesting statistics that you gave us at the beginning of the report. I'm grateful for all of them. That is the conclusion of tab 7. It brings us to other business that we have. We have taken care of the election of our new chairman. Congratulations again, Senator Yeager. But it does bring us to the topic of discussion of our next meeting, which I am hopeful will be in person in Nashville. I am ready to take the Zoom app off of my phone. I'm not sure if that will ever be possible, but I am ready. It opens the discussion about what the proposed dates would be and whether or not, at the will of the commission, you want staff to send you the opportunities for the future dates. But more importantly, opens the discussion of, under the new chairman's leadership, do we want to continue with our 2-day meetings that we had currently in person, or move it to a 1-day opportunity? Chairman Yeager, I will allow you to address that.
Well, thank you very much. We have in the past had the 2-day meetings coming in the afternoon and concluding our work the following morning. And then, of course, there are advantages to that, but then there are advantages to coming in and compressing all the work into 1 day so you can get in and get out. I'm at the will of the body. I think I probably prefer coming in the afternoon and leaving the next day, but I'm at the will of the body. I can adjust to either, but it's something that we would really like to hear from you. I'm wondering what the best way to move on this would be. Should we just, Mr. Lippard, could we poll the members to see what their preference is on the date and what the date, or whether they want to do it, spread it over 2 days or 1 day? Would that be an appropriate way to assess the will of the body?
I believe so, Mr. Chairman. We have some proposed dates. If I can go ahead and share for planning purposes, but then I can ask April to poll the members on those dates. We were working with our work program. We were looking at maybe possibly, if it's a 2-day meeting, either the 15th and 16th of September or the 22nd and 23rd of September. But we are fairly flexible. The summer meeting we've conducted it in the past anytime between the end of August. Of course, we always want to work around summer schedules and such, and up through mid-September, even to the end of September. We don't like to go any further than that in the September meeting, or it gets a little bit too close to our fall meeting.
Dr. Lippard, I would second Chairman Yeager's request to poll the body of both the prospective dates in September as well as 1-day or 2-day meetings. I do see that Mayor McDonald possibly has a comment or follow-up.
Yes, thank you. The Governor's Conference on Economic Development, and it's going to be in Murfreesboro, September the 15th through the 17th. So I just throw that out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Maybe I might throw in maybe throw in a third set of dates the week before that then as well. But we can poll the members. I see Representative Crawford, Chairman Crawford.
I was just going to say, we normally meet in the middle of the week, right? Could we possibly move it to a Wednesday, Thursday, or a Thursday, Friday?
I believe the dates I was looking at was Wednesday, Thursday, Mr. Chairman. But I may be. Yeah, I was looking at Wednesday, Thursday, but we could also look at a Thursday, Friday. We have met on Thursday, Friday in the past as well. We'll do we can do a collection of maybe 5 separate dates during that period and see if we have an obvious winner based on that.
Some of us have a 5-hour drive down there, so I like to make the best of it when I go down.
And then if I could add just one other thought, Chairman Yeager or Chairman Brooks, whoever wishes to recognize me. Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. One of the advantages, and you are correct, there are advantages to both the 1-day format and the 2-day format, but one of the advantages the 2-day format is as we get back into our normal meeting mode and we start having, with all these reports, having more panels. Panels can take quite a bit of energy and time, and even with the 2-day format, sometimes I think we've needed stretchers to take people out after the end of some of those meetings. So that's one reason I would tend to lean towards the 2-day meeting format, but we will certainly poll the members as to their preference.
Yeah. And another factor, Mr. Lippert, if I may, that was just mentioned by John's comments, some folks have a 5-hour drive or a 3 to 5-hour drive to get here, and to compress it in 1 day means you're going to have an early start, and so someone's going to have to really get up early and get out of that. That's a factor, I think, to consider.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
All right.
Paula?
I think Commissioner
I'm sorry,
Davis.
Mr. Chairman, Paula Davis, Commissioner Davis.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. I wanted to follow up on I think Mayor McDonald said the Economic Development Conference. Would you please state that again? Because our conference will be in August, on August the 5th.
The dates I have for the governor's conference on economic development to be held in Murfreesboro, September the 15th through the 17th. Has that changed?
I believe that's the tourism conference, sir.
That's what I have, is the tourism conference on the
great.
15th.
Thank
and
you.
then the governor's conference in August.
Yes.
Okay. Jill, would you shoot me that in a text or something?
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
Thanks.
All right, so I believe Chairman Yeager has requested, and I have seconded that request, to poll the members on date options as well as meeting format options. We've had some lively discussion and some date alternatives offered, and I believe without further discussion, we will wait for April and the staff to send those emails out, and we will respond accordingly, each to his own preference. Dr. Lippert, before I turn it back over to Chairman Yeager, are there any other comments from you as director?
Just one, Mr. Chairman, and that is we were unable to resolve, and I'm still not sure what was going on with Representative Parkinson's sound with his microphone, but what he was trying to say, and he asked me to pass it along, is he also wanted to thank you for your service as Vice Chairman and your service as Interim Chairman.
It has been my honor, and it is not a position that I take lightly, and service during our friend Mike Carter's illness is not one that I sought in any way, but I was thrilled to be a part of letting him know that we're going to be okay. And I am getting text messages actually from the Carter family during this meeting, and I'm very, very grateful that that friendship and that legacy of Chairman Carter remains with us, and the hard work that he worked so diligently on. This was one of his favorite things. He loved to have the deep dive, and so I think it's appropriate that we end acknowledging his hard work over all these years. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if there, I'll resume the gavel again. And my read of the agenda tells me there is no other business. But I will ask, is there any other business? And there being none, do we have a motion to adjourn? All right, thank you, John. We'll stand in adjournment and thank all of you for coming today. And thank you for your support. I'm looking forward to leading this group and working with our fine staff. Thank you and good day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.